Good morning, Michael. Thank you for taking some time out and getting involved in this week's Business Owner Spotlight. Would you like to go ahead, introduce yourself, and tell us all a bit about what you do?
Sure, Scott. Thanks for inviting me along. Hopefully, an interesting chat. I'm currently the managing director of a company called Everun. We are an engineering business in the renewable energy sector. Been going about 15 years. Primarily, we manage and maintain wind turbines. So part of the overall electricity generating grid. We have about 400 turbines under management between Ireland and Scotland now. So yeah, really interesting business. We do a few other things as well, solar and a few other energy related activities that we've got into over the last few years. So yeah, a really interesting sector to be involved in.
And so would that, am I right in saying then you guys actually create the energy and then put it right the way through to where it's an end user can benefit from it? Is it sort of end to end for a
Yeah,
customer?
yeah. Primarily, what we're doing is maintaining generating assets. So yeah, those single site turbines that you see around Northern Ireland, as well as the wind farms. Our engineers are out on the road repairing them, maintaining them, servicing them, making sure they're available to generate for the maximum amount of time possible. Obviously, we can't control the wind, but having the turbines available to generate is what we do. That power gets sent off to the grid. The grid operators, Northern Ireland Electricity Networks and Sony, they control how it gets to the end user.
Yeah.
So yeah, our piece is really in the generation end of the
Okay.
world.
So who would be your ideal customer then? You know, who would you essentially service as a customer?
Yeah, in some ways it's quite a small customer base. So we've got owners of wind farms. They tend to be the larger utilities, people like Scottish Power Renewables, SSE, RES, and then single site turbines in Northern Ireland are owned by a mix of either portfolios, so those tend to be fund managers. They're owned by pension funds
Sure.
and large investors. So we have London fund managers and Dublin fund managers that we provide a turnkey service for. So we take all the hassle out of managing those assets for them at an engineering and an asset management compliance basis. So those are our customers, relatively small customer base. There is obviously a suite of customers who are farmers and local investors, particularly in the single site market. So we enjoy talking to them as well.
Sure.
Very different, obviously, to a London fund manager or
Yes.
or a utility level operator. But so an interesting diversity, not a massive customer base, as I say, but those are the people we talk to, and we
Sure.
really enjoy that. Yeah.
And then you mentioned if you guys are in solar as well, is that right?
We do a little bit of solar. We've done that over the last couple of years. So in the last 3-4 years, we've tried to diversify a little bit in various different directions, both geographically. So we've moved into Scotland in the last 3 years quite successfully. So that's been a nice challenge, but also in our product set as well. So looking at solar as a generating technology is well understood now. There's lots of large energy users, businesses out there with rooftops who can satisfy some of their own electricity demands. And with the spike in power prices over the last couple of years, that's certainly been something a lot of manufacturers and large energy users have really had to think about. So they're out investing in their own generating capacity, or at least part of it. And we've been helping either building those or maintaining those for them. So we do a little bit of solar. We do a few other things around heating and ventilation systems, so smart
Okay.
motor systems, which has been quite interesting. Certainly a challenge in terms of having diversified into those areas.
Yeah.
We
Very
moved
different. Yeah.
into doing some work in the EV charging sector as well. Again, sort of cut to our ethos around renewable energy and new markets. That one's been more of a challenge for us, if I'm honest. We've stepped back from that a little bit. It's been a market that well, proved a challenge. Let me put it
Sure.
like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I think it's an ever shifting market, that. So,
Yeah. But
but
that's
it's
business, isn't it? You try something, see if it works. You know, it doesn't. You know, reverse, go somewhere else.
exactly, yeah, and it's been a good challenge for us in many ways to understand how far to stretch ourselves. What
Sure.
are the sort of diversification activities that we want to pursue? And it's sometimes it's been tough, to make a decision. We've gone down a particular route, it hasn't quite worked for us. It's kind of hard to admit that didn't really work, but
But
make the decision to
that's
pull
the
away
yeah.
from it, stop, move on to something else, or even just move back to the core of what's made us a really successful company over the years. So I think this year we've had quite a refocus on the wind sector and where the opportunities lie in that, which are, you know, which are really good for us.
And just before we get into the business side of things, just to finish off, so you mentioned like people are investing in solar, so that would lead me to believe you're actually saving them money. Then they would expect a return if they
Yeah.
put your solar panels on the roof, or they invest in a wind turbine. People are doing this. It's not a cost. Then it's going to save them money.
Yeah, ultimately it will. Look, there's a capital investment for it, but I
Sure.
mean most solar installations in a commercial scale at the minute, you know, should be paying back in 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah.
Solar panels now last 20 to 25 years. The inverter technology, you know, 10 to 15 years. So, you know, if you're trying to lock in, what we usually work with businesses to say is if you're trying to lock in a fixed price for your energy costs, if you've invested in your own capacity, you know what that's costing you in terms of your
Yeah.
return
You can
every
prove it
year.
then.
So, you know, you've paid for the capacity up front.
Yeah.
You're getting it at a fixed price. So you know your input cost, you know, if you're a manufacturer, at least part of your input cost is your energy bill.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's hurt manufacturers in the last couple of years is the variability of that, the spike in energy prices. You know, that's really tough to pass on, you know, when you're planning production. So,
Sure.
you know, solar and wind capacity to a degree, you know, is a really solid investment because it gives business owners predictability about where they're going, and a fixed price in inverted commas for
Yeah,
at
which
least part of their
it's
demand, part of their
that sort
maintenance.
of little bit of certainty just
Yeah,
means a
yeah,
lot when you sit and try and do your budgets.
yeah.
So that's really cool. Mike, I've got a better understanding of what you guys do and how you help people. Keen to understand a bit more about you. How did you give us a whistle stop tour of how you've ended up being the MD of an energy generating company
Yeah, I wonder that myself sometimes.
on Monday morning.
I've been on a yeah, and a Friday evening. I look, I've always been involved in private business, and I've been lucky to be in a number of different sectors as they've been going through periods of significant change. So I worked, goodness, nearly 20 years ago now, I suppose. Boy, it's longer than that in the telecom sector as it was growing and changing, and you know, back in the days of dial-up and you know, the original cable companies putting television down your phone line.
We've just lost half the audience now.
Yeah, but it was a fascinating subject at the time. You know, when we see where telecoms is today, it's extraordinary, and I was lucky to be in that sector for about 10 years from university. And you know, from there I actually ran my own business for a while, a real diversion into the wedding car hire sector because I was into classic cars, so it was a good excuse to drive cars all day. Not the most profitable business in the world, so moved away into aerospace for a while. Again, in a general management role there, in an industry that was changing and evolving. There's a lot of R&D in aerospace, and really enjoyed that as a sector. And then came into the renewable sector with Everun about 6.5 years ago. They were a privately owned business. The owners were wanting to take a little bit of a step back from day-to-day management, so I came in to run the business for them.
Would you say then there's parallels, but just because the telecoms, the aerospace, and then the renewables now, all I would say quite high tech businesses that we're going through a big change. Are there parallels between those three industries that you've seen and learned from?
Yeah, for sure, and the pace of change in each of them, while I've been involved, has been from my perspective really interesting career direction. It's obviously not just as a result of me being in these sectors, but they're all also sectors that are making things, you know, and underlying my career, I've always enjoyed being in engineering businesses and those type of companies. I'm fascinated by how we make things and how we do things. You know, I was never an engineer. I'm not an engineer. The guys here don't let me near, you know, the internals of a wind turbine because I'd want to play with things and press buttons. But you know, the parallel for my career is simply in sectors where engineering has been the dominant output, and
Yeah.
you know, that just fascinates me, how we make things and how we do things. I really enjoy that.
And you know, and it's important to be interested in what you're actually doing, you know. But you know, what would you say has been from those three really diverse industries, despite the parallels? What would you say has been your biggest lesson you've had since you've been in business over those last 20, 30 years?
Yeah, I think more laterally, because I've always come at things looking at, right, what resources have we got? What can we do with them? And, you know, maybe how do we diversify? How do we do more with those resources and do different things? And that's always a you know, big temptation. And I've been lucky to be in companies and sectors where, you know, that was the feeling. Let's do more, let's grow. But that's a challenge, as I said earlier. You can go too far in that, and I think that's a big lesson over you know, more recent times, is actually maybe don't go too far too soon. Don't forget the core of what you're doing, what you're really
So
good
I'm
at.
interested. How do you make that decision? You know, is it, if it's in your head, it's going to be an emotional decision. Is that just solely looking at the logical numbers then, or how do you say, like, it's time to stop, go back?
Yeah, I mean, the numbers never lie. I'm not, as I say, an engineer. I'm on, you know, I bring the commercial aspects to this, or hopefully I do. And you can't lie with the numbers and profit, and you know, the age old statement around, you know, revenue and profit is right. You know, revenues look great on a paper, but if you're not making any money, you're expending a lot of energy and time. But that's hard. It is an emotional decision at time, particularly, you know, in the role today. You know, I'm running this business on behalf of two other people who are quite hands off, but still know exactly what's going on in this business, as owners and shareholders tend to do. You know, and it's tough to sometimes admit you've got something wrong, or you've gone in a direction you shouldn't have, or something has shifted. You know, we tend to blame ourselves a lot, but you know, sometimes the market shifts, things do something you didn't expect, and you have to be mature enough, I guess, to take that on the chin and move forward with it. I think the other thing is, you absolutely, what I've learned all the way through is you have to rely on a team. You know, there's a time to lead and there's a time to listen to your team. And when they're saying, you know, this doesn't look like it's working the way we thought, you know, yes, you want to inspire people, drive them on, you know, instill a wee bit of confidence, but actually listening is a really important part of that. And
Interesting.
saying to your team, what do we think on this? Where are we going? How do we do that? And, you know, and I think the other thing is fostering an environment where they're going to tell you the truth. Funny, we had a budget meeting this week, and we're looking at our next 5-year strategy. You know, and our ops director here, as I was deciding which direction we're going in certain things, said, that's not what we want to do. We said we weren't going to do that 3 months ago. We're still doing it. Why are we doing this? And it was a real challenge, you know, and it was, but you got to be able to take that, and you've got to, I think, foster the environment where somebody can say that without it being you know, it turning into a massive bug fight.
That's such a big, you know, feedback on your leadership. You know, I mean, like, a leader's job is to create other leaders, and if you can have somebody who's, you know, technically maybe more slightly junior to you, but actually steering you in the right direction, I think that's it. You know, and I'm going to assume you know, you maybe didn't have that ability 20 years ago when you were a bit more new into the role.
No, I think that's something you learn, and maybe I've matured over the years. Maybe you see different things. Maybe it just comes at the right time when you have to be ready to listen. You know, I've been involved in sectors where so much change is going on. It's all about that. You got to keep changing and evolving and making things different. But sometimes it's, let's have a pause here. Let's take a breath. Is this really doing, you know, the core of our objectives? And it's easy to get carried along, and I have done many times over my career. And sometimes it's worked out, and sometimes you regret it.
And so I'm keen as well. I don't see a lot of businesses handling change very well. You know, how is there a bit of advice you could give on how, just having been so involved in rapid change throughout your career, is there any advice you could give people on how to handle change?
Uh, well, keep your goal in mind. You know, what is it that you're trying to get to? And you know, this is, I guess, sounds really simple, but you know, what is that goal? Make a plan. What are the steps in the middle? and then just keep reviewing it. You
Yeah.
got to make sure you bring your people with you. I mean, you know, it's a really obvious thing to say, I know.
But it's an
Teamwork.
obvious thing to say, but a lot of people don't do it.
You know, it's the temptation in leadership to just set the direction and insist that everyone follow you. And you can insist all you want, but if people don't buy into what you're selling, it's going to fall apart. So, you know, you got to bring people with you. You got to explain what you're trying to do. You got to listen to when they say, you know, this might be an issue or that might be an issue. And sometimes you got to go, yeah, I accept that, but we're gonna keep going anyway. We're prepared to take that risk, or I'm prepared to take that risk. Yeah, you got to bring the people with you. You can't do anything on your own, really. You know, you have to have
100%.
a team.
Totally agree with that. So you know, we've talked about how you've you know, developed as a leader. Is there anything you would have done differently throughout your career if you had your chance again?
Is there anything I would have done differently? No, I think it's been pretty perfect. You know, I'm not sure. I know I've made lots and lots of mistakes at different times. It's usually the things that I've already mentioned: not listening properly to people, you know, being a slave to a particular idea, particularly if it was my own or an objective. So it's probably best I don't trot out all those examples.
But it's funny. I ask that question a lot, and by and large, people say no, they wouldn't change because they'd sooner make a mistake and get the learning.
Yeah, that's probably a fair point. Yeah, I mean, I've arrived where I am now, with the capabilities I have as a result of everything that's gone before, good and bad. So yeah, I mean, I would I change a lot? No, I mean, as I say, I've been really lucky to be in sectors which have been really interesting and exciting and interested me. And you know,
I
whether
think
that's
that's the
luck or
thing. We
design.
touched on that earlier. You know, you've always been interested in the thing, which has guided you the right direction. You know, you say you've been lucky to be in three sectors. I'm thinking there must be something more to it than luck. Is it maybe that you were just interested in the right things?
Yeah, it probably is. I mean, I've tended not to jump around in my career. I've had, as I say, three main roles over 25, 30 years now. You know, so I'm not the type of person necessarily who's just going, right, I fancy a change.
Yeah.
What will I go and do next? Where's their job with X in the title? So yeah, I've always been interested in what I've been doing, and they've fascinated me to learn about them, even if I'm not, as I say, if it's an engineering business, I'm not an engineer. So it's fascinated me to be part of that and play some sort of a role within it.
So what does the next 5 years look like for everyone? And what do you see as the main challenges moving forward then?
Well, there's a couple of things. The challenges are all in, like a lot of business in recruitment right now. Building a team, growing a team. The alchemy of that is really difficult. We've got a problem in renewables, but across engineering generally, about not enough young people coming into the engineering sector and seeing it as a career route. We've suffered a little bit, I think, that, you know, a lot of people with the skills historically now end up in IT rather than in hands-on engineering. So we've got to really promote engineering as a really good career path, and energy engineering, which is a mixture of electrical and mechanical engineering. It's a really good hands-on job for young people and older people too, I should say. Never too old to learn these things. So I think our biggest challenge as a business is recruiting people. We're actively doing that at the minute, but we've had to be a little bit more innovative about what we do. So we've sort of created our own little internal academy. It's not quite an apprenticeship scheme. It's a sort of variation on a theme where we'll bring some people through at our pace in terms of training them on the types of quite niche skill sets that we have. We have our engineers maintaining wind turbines. You know, they're climbing wind turbines on a daily basis. There's all sorts of safety issues around that, as well as just the hands-on engineering. So we created a little academy. We've done open recruitment days. We're trying lots of different things to unlock the talent pool. Because without that, we won't do what we want to do over the next 5 years, which is, like a lot of businesses, to grow And I mentioned earlier, we're setting out our new 5-year plan at the minute. We see great opportunities, as I say, in Scotland, and outside our core areas here in Ireland. So we want to grow the business. We have a sort of working title of Project 1000 going on at the minute, which is how do we get involved in 1,000 wind turbines from where we are today, which is 400. So yeah, that's where we see the business going, a real core around energy generation, renewable generation. It's such an important sector. To this, it's going to sound very laudable, I'm sure. Energy underpins a lot of of everything we do day to day business and at a domestic level. So we have a chance to create an amount of energy independence by building out more renewable assets, having control of those, reducing the amount of energy sources that we have to bring into the province. That's mainly oil and gas and fossils, which we don't control. So let's do things where we control, where we can keep the investment and the money here locally, circulating the economy, but it underpins what else we want to do within our wider business communities. And having been in other sectors, the benefits of having controlled energy pricing, I think, is really important. So we see ourselves playing a role in that. That's a very grand statement, I know, but that's what we see.
You don't think big. You're just gonna stay where you are. So now I applaud that. And again, it seems like it makes massive commercial sense, but then there's the whole environmental side of things as well, which is a bit of responsibility on a lot of businesses these days too.
It's definitely a driving theme, carbon reduction and people's impact on the environment. Consumers are driving that. We do work for the hospitality sector, for instance. There's a big drive there that consumers are wanting places where they're spending their money to consider that environmental impact. And I think we can play a role in that just by doing good business. I think we see Everun first and foremost as a business. It's a commercial operation. We create employment, create profits for our shareholders. That benefits all of us. But the knock-on impact of working in this sector, and the much wider impacts on clean air, the impact on health that brings for people, creating jobs that bring people through the education sector, as I say, engineering type jobs. All of that is sort of underpinning what we're trying to achieve here as a business, as Everun's business, but also as the sector. And I think I really enjoy that about this sector, because it's all coming together as a sector.
They're very nice byproducts of a successful business, aren't they?
Yeah, I think they are, and I think they should be. I mean, we do consider our impacts more broadly on the communities we work in, and I think that's a good thing to do.
100%, 100%. I always like to finish on this question, Michael. Is if you could go back in time, speak to an 18-year-old Michael, what piece of advice would you give him?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I'd played more sports, so I'd probably say don't give up sports after school, which I pretty much did. I think I would go back and say keep calm. You don't need a life plan just yet. And I think there's a lot of pressure coming out of schools still today. I have a 22-year-old daughter who's in I guess in a similar-ish position. I didn't go to university from school. I wasn't particularly academic. I was unclear on where I was going. I got a management trainee position fairly early on, and that sort of helped get me started in the world of work and that sort of thing. But I really didn't have a very good plan. And I think I'd look back now and say, that's okay, Michael. You don't actually need one. You've got time. It's okay. You don't need to map everything out. Look at what you're interested in. Do a bit more of that. Keep going with education. And I did. I went back to education and both college and ultimately university. And that stood me in good stead in terms of helping my career develop. But there's a time for everything. And
you probably needed to do a bit to find out what you needed to study in later life instead of just following that path.
Absolutely, and I think I did better at studying as a result of having paused and stepped out of it for a while. But yeah, I think it's that is 18's very young. It feels even younger now that I have a daughter that's she's past that now. So don't panic. You don't need a life plan mapped out yet. Take your time.
Listen, thank you, Michael. Really enjoyed that. Some really interesting chat about leadership there. Some great advice. Keep calm. We'll definitely try and keep that front of mind myself. And look, thank you so much for giving us your time and sharing that with us today.
Brilliant, Scott. Thanks for chatting to me.